Josephine, as discussed, what I'm trying to do here is just show you the basics of why I use a site mapping system, the software I've developed, how the system works, and why it's critical to my QA. It's my system that I've created here that underpins all the QA in my office, but it's driven by a paperless office. It's driven by a lot of links, a lot of Excel tools and PDFs, and also a lot of audio. And I'll go through this now. When you do a job, you're trying to control processes. We all know that in taxation, one of the toughest things you're up against is getting your staff to do things properly. You need to then have reviews and checklists. The reality is you've got senior staff, you've got junior staff. Junior staff do work, you need to control the work they do. Tax is extremely complex, and at the same time employees are often not knowledgeable of tax law, so you're always juggling how to get things right. And I'll give you an example of this basic system. What I have done is create a series of electronic interactive checklists. So this is, think of it as in terms of a process, a procedural process to do a set of financials at the end of the year. Each one of these steps asks and gives accountants, employees, and in my case bookkeepers and firms that are using different templates that I create, a system in order to process. So for example, in terms of, say, work papers, when you complete a step, you just check them off. I'm just showing you this basic principle. So you follow each one of these steps, and each one of these steps will ask you to do certain things. For example, here we have our standard work papers. When you click on this, it'll then open up the standard office work papers. This is then saved. It's a template. It's saved and linked to the file, and it then forms part of a work paper that can be accessed by anyone in the office. The idea behind it is to standardize. It also allows me to create the tools I need for staff to use. And I'll give you an example of where audio comes in. This one here is called a profit and loss review. We all know that when junior staff are working on accounts, if you're trying to teach them and you're trying to help them understand, and senior people like me are spread very thinly, you need to give them a basic checklist. So here's an example where they would go into this step here, and then I've created effectively it's this step here. I've created a PDF that has, for each one of the main accounts that we deal with in accounting, there is an audio and then an area where you tick off what you've done. Each one of these audios explains in a very quick and general way the problems that you can experience with those accounts amongst clients. So for sales, for example, it'll talk about being careful that the client hasn't put a loan deposit in the sales account incorrectly and we pick it up as income when we shouldn't. Talks about how to identify problems such as if an amount in the sales account is a very rounded amount, an even amount, it often doesn't constitute sales it's worth looking at. When you go to accounting fees, it talks about the fact of the size of those fees. It's giving the employee or the person doing these processes pointers about what to look for. It's as if I was in the room trying to tell them. Now these are audio driven because that's the most effective way of undertaking this sort of information. It's not designed to be the end of the story, but audio is an effective way of doing it. Now as they get familiar with these things, they don't have to listen to these audios, but they're there. As you move through, there are more tools and more checklists, but underpinning these tools and checklists, there's always a reference to audios. For example, when we're doing motor vehicle claims in our office, this is where I can now use the system to create tools and templates. Again, these are all electronic and then they convert into work papers. So for sole traders, partnerships and trusts, if you're doing tax and you're doing it professionally, there are 4 ways of claiming potentially such expenses. So what happens here, there is a link. That is when the person working on the accounts is in this area, and this is a spreadsheet that allows people to select the year they're doing, put in the expenses, and it will do a calculation as to what offers the best tax deduction in the case if there's an election available for claiming a vehicle. Now once again, these are electronic checklists. A lot of them have underpinning audios to explain how to use them. Another aspect to using site mapping, for example, there's one here to do with fuel. So we're in an area here where we're dealing with motor vehicle expenses. If you're trying to calculate fuel expenses, and as you may or may not know, in tax law you don't have to have fuel receipts subject to certain issues, then you can use interactive forms like this where you can hyperlink a a website that allows you to put in the details of all the cars in the country and it automatically calculates fuel. A lot of this sort of material is available on the internet. Then you can then calculate what is the average price of fuel. Once again, there's a website here that hyperlinks that will give you information about what the average rate of fuel is during the year in different cities and locations. And you then put this information in, and this PDF has a formula and it will calculate the expected fuel for that car for the year. Now these are tools that I use. My whole office is driven by this process. One final point about this, and I'm going to skip a lot of steps here, don't underestimate the complexity of tax law and the benefit of getting people to think through and give them the tools they need to get things right. It is very difficult for accountants, and we both know that the error rate in accounting firms is rising. Litigation against accountants is rising. One of the reasons is this complexity in tax law. So for example, let's take an area that is subject to a lot of problems, Division 7A. Now here I have a basic checklist for Division 7A, so as you're working through an accounts and you're doing a company, you then click in here, you now get a flowchart. Now once again, flowcharts can form part of a sitemap. So this is asking the employee or the person who's in this area to have a quick think about the issues. It's not definitive. Division 7A can get very complex. So for example, does the PTY have a debit balance loan? And then the question is yes or no. It could be a UPE, it could be a loan. Then the question is, if you've got a debit balance loan, the key tax question is there a distributable surplus? So you would click here, you would then open a file, and that file is an Excel spreadsheet, which is a tool that I have created that allows you to quickly calculate the rules underlying and do the calculation for what constitutes a distributable surplus. The next issue is, the next step is, if there is a distributable surplus, then you can ask the question, is it an accepted loan? You can highlight here, gives you more information. Then it says, is there a Division 7 loan agreement? If you need to have such an agreement to make the loan an excluded loan, and then you click in here and it will open up what that agreement is. Now once again, these are all links that can partially be driven by audios. You'll notice here there are audios that explain these links. In here, for example, there's another hyperlinked spreadsheet, which is the actual Div 7A interest loan calculator. And then once you're in here, you're clicking again to access the website to get the rates. This is the sort of thing I do. It allows people who work in this area to move much more quickly, but it is all electronic. It doesn't work with any form of paper. Consequently, in my office, all documents are scanned, everything is searched through using Acrobat index filing. We use the Windows site mapping system to search documents as well. This is how the whole process has gone. Here's another example, just to wrap up. Does the proprietary limited in fact have a UPE? Because this is a complex question. Again, you can't go through it all. You open here, so here's some literature and another audio embedded in that literature which explains the basics. So you'll hear me talking about what the critical issues are. It's not a definitive explanation of everything because law changes and principles change, so you keep it generic. But it's trying to create the basics so that people can understand it. That's how my system works. Now my QA manual operates in the same way. If you go into my software and look at my QA manual, it's designed exactly the same way, and I've got it here. I'm not going to show you because this video will get too long, but it takes you through all the relevant steps. You then click onto either MP4s, MP3s, workflow charts, further audios, further notes. It's all searchable, it's all accessed through this system. Now my concern is with my QA review is that the person who is looking at this has paid no attention to this. I've never been asked about this system. I've been dealing with him for 3 months. At no point has he made any effort to try and remotely understand what it is or how it works, and yet it underpins everything that I do. And I'm very concerned, as mentioned, that what I'm heading into is someone who has very little knowledge of these systems, who seems to dislike them, coming into my office, telling me that this work, and I've got a lot of work done in here. These systems I have, for example, if you look at all templates, and this is just a few of them. I've got templates for auditing super funds, templates for doing BAS returns. I have templates for doing ASICs. There's the QA manual in there. There's a whole client filing system. There's a lot of templates where I explain exactly how things are done, but it's always about video, audio, links. There are PDFs, there are documents, there's Word, there's Excel, there's all those normal things. but none of it's in the traditional print me type manual. And effectively what I'm really trying to bring home is that's my system. I believe I have a very strong, and I've got proof of all this in these systems. I mean, I've designed this software specifically for my own practice to do this, and for my clients who get involved in processing or trying to do their own BASs and so on. And I'm having a lot of trouble dealing with someone who simply refuses to look at this and seems to take the view that whatever this is, it's not a manual, and therefore he has to go to some length at a cost of $250 an hour on my part to tell me whether it suits or not. I'm finding this difficult. I believe, and I'm happy to demonstrate this to anybody, that this system is a comprehensive QA system. In fact, it goes well beyond it. I don't think many accountancy practices, particularly small firms, and I am a small firm, have these sort of control systems.